Sheila here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and the moon is next to Deneb Algadi with Saturn in Aries and Mars conjoining Neptune. So Mars is closing a cycle with Neptune before it's going to close a cycle with Saturn. And this is the time where we hear that the ceasefire is about to end. And the gnosis that I'm getting is the people who justify rape by saying that this is nature. So this is a theme that has been coming up. They are going to watch their nature basically becoming nuclear dust. The people who hold nature dear and justify nature by rape are going to find all the nature becoming nuclear dust. And I was born in around 1984. And in that year, there was a nuclear leak in India. Pluto was ingressing into Scorpio. It was doing the back and forth. And Pluto ingress into Scorpio marks a year where the psychosexual depth, because there was also Saturn involved, of those who thought that rape is nature was to watch their nature becoming nuclear dust. And unfortunately, we're having such time. I've seen that theme coming up. I've seen that theme coming up in COVID. I've seen that theme coming up in 2007. I've seen that theme coming up in the past 2 years. Not radically, but yesterday was definitely, and it was closing a cycle of 2.5 years. So it's a Saturn, so it's a Mars-Neptune cycle. And it's interesting because Mars-Neptune previous cycle was opening, I believe, in Pisces. And it had to do with belief about Mars. Mars will apply to square Jupiter from Aries. Um, here are the facts. The facts that the Epstein files also exposed the connection to MK Ultra and MK Ultra cloning farms, and this is the role of ritual abuse in shaping society, and the fact that whether it's psychopathy, narcissism, and the responsive borderline, dissociative identity disorder, neurodivergence, and ADHD, eating disorders, various ailments, particularly cancer, and nervous system ailments. And what people ascribe to as human nature was basically created, forged by torture, revealing something completely different around human nature. And since those things persistent for quite some time, And since those are related to lines of power that keep coming up, it's not the bloodline, but the practices. And the practices that glorify rape are not nature, are not the nature of anything. They are extincting the very bloodlines. I think the last time we saw something like this was at the Spanish flu. Okay, the death of the aristocracy, and yeah, they like, oh, they got vaccinated. We had we had formed a new nobility for a reason. And when that new nobility was continuing the cycles of the old nobility, it has a bubble that bursts into something. And same as, okay, the Jews went through the Holocaust. Amazing. What did they then? Blame it on assimilation and the women. Amazing. What are they going through now? It's not anti-Semitism. And those that insist on seeing rape as natural, raping children, manufacturing. Do you know how what people call sex worker is created? Forged by torture, but also how what people call Epstein is created in that way. What is the result of that chronic helplessness of both the offender and the raped? Nuclear energy, radiation that makes of nature something unlivable. That is the essence of what happened. The essence of extortion cult was forged through that. I find it sad that we are closing a cycle with Neptune, although Mars has a couple of hours before the actual minute. But I find it sad we are closing a cycle with Neptune, people still believing that it's kind of like believing that radioactive dust is oxygen. Believing that rape is natural is like believing that radioactive dust is oxygen. Our nature is naturally discerning as the immune system is discerning what is toxic and what is not. If rape is natural, then colonialism is the natural way. If slavery is natural, then humanity going extinct is the natural way. The natural way of humanity is to go extinct because it is a species that is weak and incompetent in its ability to create, preserve, and honor life and love. That which is aligned with love is not raped. That with which aligns with love and is not raped or rapey doesn't create nuclear holocaust. That which isn't does. it manifests, it wishes for a, a phase, whether being an offender or being a victim, it its entire psyche manifests, creates and commands the end of such humanity and such nature. One of the people that were associated with Epstein, and it wasn't so loud, according to correspondences exposed by YouTube, um, was Mark Rutte, and he was involved through investment in a media company called End Them All. Mark Rutte, according to testimonies of survivors, went through ritual abuse, which means that the person is raped and have to rape. End them all, very simply put, end them all is what one is invested. And when they go through chronic ritual abuse, which is what created. Now, Mark Rutte was Prime Minister of the Netherlands for a decade and a half. Now he is the Secretary General of NATO. That's the guy which involvement in a company, in a media company that was involved with the Epsteins, is exposed a day prior to United States wanting to renew and besiege Hormuz, perhaps pressuring for an Article 5. Now we have to ask ourselves two questions. Financially, what does it mean that the economy is running by people that went through ritual abuse, that raped and had to rape, where this condition is basically creating mind control? And now NATO is invested in the very technologies that prevent it being able to identify invasion. Rape of the intelligence means that the intelligence is unable to identify invasion. Israel saw this in 7th October. False flag or not. This entire transit or stellium is happening in NATO's 8th house, which is things swept under the rug. The second question is the decision to invoke Article 5 or not just by one person, but by the entire European Union. Not just an act of extortion, but fueled by beliefs or ideologies that see rape as the natural and fail to identify the invasion and the infiltration. Is Article 5 invocation going to be run by forces and people that went through rape and being raped, whether astrally or not? And that is going to dictate the nature of what can come out of invoking Article 5, what it can achieve. Only the raped want total control. And if it seeks to achieve it by raping, then it gets total helplessness because, and this is the Mars Neptune, it reminds us that children are dealing with astral rape, that infants are targeted. There's nothing natural about that. The nature that it creates is radioactive dust. That creates the investments in what is a media company? A media company, the media is the message. And the name of the message is end them all. A very understandable message that grew up in environment of ritual abuse, basically of rape. The children that nobody came to save are running the show, and that's what they're invested in. Mars square Jupiter. Let's take a look at when Mars is square in Jupiter, because Mars square Jupiter is usually a fight over beliefs or religious war. And Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, Mars is at home in Aries. Where is the Mars Jupiter? April 20, we're gonna have Mars conjunct in Saturn. Okay, that means we're going to May. We're going to May, opening a cycle with Neptune, opening a cycle with Saturn, and Mars squares Jupiter. Where is the Mars square Jupiter? Mars conjoins Chiron May 16, but before that, Mars square Jupiter, May 5. Yikes. Around my solar return. Taurus, Taurus people have had quite some. I think since COVID, we have had some quite horrible solar returns, particularly the middle decan Taurus. Um, from 19 degrees Aries to 19 degrees Cancer. Nature and choice. Identity and choice. Rape negates identity and thus negates choice. Voting out the ability, let's say, of a woman to say no is voting out 2 generations of men from existing. And people don't get to tell which Centaurian survives. Like I said, this war is accentuating something very clearly. Those who justify rape and those who create technologies that are used to rape are voting themselves out of the world. Whether there are people, empires, companies, corporations, that's the them that is ending. Falcon, if you didn't want me to see that, if you didn't want me to see that correspondence and that message, then it wouldn't be shoved at my algorithm. Those who rape and blame it on the person that they raped are only summoning their own death in the Great War. The moon will be in Mula Nakshatra upon this square. This is the Great War. You're opening a cycle. Mars separates from Neptune, separates from Saturn, and opens a cycle of the first square with Jupiter, which is a opening of the synodic cycle with Neptune in the sign of war. Everything in this chart says the Great War. Now Jupiter is exalted. The moon is in Mula Nakshatra. And Mars in Aries is the Great War over the I Am. It's the war of the ability of the I Am to access the choice to be. Rape negates the choice to be. Whether it's causing people to want to unalive themselves or to extinct all humanity. And we see that a media company named literally End Them All is showing us of what one is invested. What does all that so-called power goes when that power is by the helplessness of basically rapey environment? Who is them? In Aries, every individual is an I am. All bloodlines. Those who did not abolish rape and had it in their power to stop it. I'm talking about had it in the power, meaning that they were aware that they are able to stop it. And justified it as nature, are going to see a nature that is radioactive dust. There is no autonomy without abolishing rape. Autonomy cannot exist in a rapist situation. Autonomy is immediately violated the minute there is violation of sexual boundaries. Nothing has an autonomy when there is rape. No class, no bloodline, no empire. And by the way, no individual. A lot of people think that, oh, those things that are over there. No. It's the fact that people were wanting to unalive themselves for decades for what seemed like nobody could diagnose the reason. Just like radioactive radiation goes untracked. The people who say no to rape as children are tagged as selfish. If they get to adult, they are tagged as whores because they said no to rape. That chronic deprivation of love that is actually loving ends up in something. And nobody is able to breathe the air that it manufactures. They can claim its nature, but they would have to come to conclusion that the nature of Earth no longer sustains life. Or if they would discover Earth as a planet, they would say this planet cannot sustain life. Where are our points of interferences or our choices? Well, awareness is one. Mars Neptune conjunction brings an opportunity here, and it is basically crossing the isolation to see that, oh my gosh, there are some people that grew with complete non attachment to religion, Christ, or Antichrist, bloodline, class, that the weird behaviors of sexual boundary violations in so many ways. That's that's what baffles me because it's like, oh, they would get a person to a situation where, let's say, they would actually be um, in a place where something was the closest approximate to something is not rapey, but then either they'll do energy siphoning or there would be a camera or something like, and then the person can no longer like. There's something that extincts the ability to naturally and organically make love. And lo and behold, the people behind it have cloning farms. And lo and behold, people need IVF births all over the place. While there is castration of entire society. How many of our politicians went through forced castration that we don't even know about? Forced gender change. How does that dictate their investments and their policies? Even without extortion. Chiron around Aries is calling us to address the wound around these supposedly superhuman projects. Ketu in Magha Nakshatra reminds us that the lineages where the leader is the solist and solipsistic, that uses this solipsistic occult, might not be compatible for humanity. If the leader's world is solipsistic, then they will project upon the world things from their solipsistic world. Ketu and Maga is a blessing in that regard because it can facilitate dematerializing that solipsism. And it can be physically by dematerializing hereditary lineages, or it can be by moving towards the first decan of Pisces and the last decan of Aquarius. Wealth redistribution in Aquarius and Fomalhaut in Pisces. Psychic awareness of the nature of nature. We don't have good psychic information when our intelligence is raped. The moon will trine Mars upon the square with Jupiter. And Rahu will be royal degree, 5 degree Pisces, with Jupiter ruling over Rahu. Mercury by then will already be in Taurus. The square between the belief and the actions here can be because Mars is coming to accentuate some individual choice and Jupiter is seeking a tribal one. And if there is going to be a tribal one, I suspect that Jupiter is going to have to deal with the belief of the tribe. But the belief of the tribe cannot be fully correct without embodying the individual. And this is why I suspect Mars here to indeed start a war. Let's talk about Israel Palestine. Oh, Palestine should have autonomy. Palestine should have this. Palestine should have that. If they rape, they will not have autonomy. Even if we can wipe Iran can wipe Israel out the planet tomorrow. By the way, it might. I don't know. Okay, and if it will, I will not live. But good thing, bad thing, who knows? If it does it in a couple of bombs, better than the ritual of use and trafficking. So Israel could be wiped out of the planet tomorrow. And it's a thought experiment that I really loved doing when I was in academia, combating what would later be resolved as not resolved, what would later be discovered as the Epstein ring. That made me go take a step back from academia and study astrology because the astrological community at least spoke about it. Pfizer, by the way, is an astrologer. I know of at least one astrologer that I suspected was targeted simply because he was a successful astrologer that predicted COVID correctly. Or on his podcast where COVID was predicted correctly. That was Chris Brennan. Nikola Stoyanovich, assassinated by supposedly COVID. I don't know if these folks were affiliated with MK Ultra or Epstein before, if it was a competition between. Okay, the privilege of studying through YouTube is um, basically as there is no must-on certification, I don't have to rape children to participate. By the way, according to the treason cult, my targeting could simply be from addressing the fact that one of my colleagues was marked for assassination and then takes a jab and another jab and another jab and another jab. The other takes his vitamins and feels better. Because in those communities, one would have to go against those that actually come for the help. Now, people that are affiliated with Epstein, it means that they were raped, that they raped, and that they have to traffic, whether it's using dark occult and stuff like that. That doesn't sustain a world, doesn't sustain astrological community in a business, but or a profession or a field study, but it also doesn't sustain a world. It undermines each and everybody's legacy and sense of basically fulfillment. Now, Venus here on the square, she's in Gemini, but right now she's actually where the Sun will be. And this is the decan that is associated with sexuality being only about willing consent or else. And what is the or else? At the last decan of Taurus, do we get psychosis and dead bodies upon dead bodies, or do we get wealth that is wealthing, namely love that is loving, spirit and matter in union, not in rapey dissociation? What's happening in the middle decan of Taurus dictates that. And it is, and Venus is also the sign of sisterhood of women. Do women justify rape? Do women see rape as natural? Because these women are basically justifying the rape of their infants, the rape of the sick, the rape of the helpless. Hanging it on the nature of men, and basically confess that they never had an orgasm that actually orgasms. They are basically virginal by the sense of them never having had sex. They had various degrees of rape, or sometimes the closest approximate to sex being siphoned as rape, but they never actually had sex. They had rape, and they call it nature. The yeast in your vagina is not natural. The unreasonable challenges at birthing are not a punishment. They are belonging to society that made policies, practices, and rituals to create experiences of birthing that are feeling like punishment. And it's not hereditary. If your mother was ritually abused, and you were ritually abused, and your grandmother was ritually abused, and your grandmother was ritually abused, it feels like, oh, there's a hereditary experience of difficult childbirth. What does it all have to do with Ghislaine Maxwell endeavors or enabling them? Now, I'm not saying it as blame. I'm saying this as the one point of interference that there is, particularly for day charts where choice is exalted, is, hey, that dumb fuckery ain't natural. Rape is not natural. Birth is not punishment. Ritual abuse is not the way of the world. Trafficking is not work. Because, of course, sex work is not work. The women that say sex work is work are trying to recruit someone to do that instead of them. Why? And then every single profession, not just entertainment or cosmetics, or in the past it was with Epstein ring, they took over touch therapy. So if we let them take over touch therapy, then academia, then any therapy, then any medical procedure. One could even argue that touch therapy was the last profession that they took over. Now, here's the good things about this transit. Jupiter exalted in Cancer reminds us that the way we see the world might not be, or the world that we see might not be the natural world. And it's not the supernatural world either. Because even the supernatural, when achieved with not from rape, looks completely different. Mothers who think that the nature of, let's say, men is to rape. What, particularly when the father is in the life of the child. If we want autonomy, we cannot, how should I say it? We cannot have autonomy when there is rape. We cannot have autonomy when person is raped, tortured, then raped, and people talk about the personal responsibility of the person that was tortured to loss of sense of self and raped. If you ask how countries get away with war crime, in that particular way. Your infant cannot stop the rape. A person tortured to that state cannot stop the rape.